What is up, my team? We are back with another Seeing Through Gebser. This will be technically our final video on the manifestations of the Aperspectival world. We'll just be doing a summary here, and I cannot stress to you how close we are to being done. Oh my god, we have like 2-3 more videos left. And the good news is my school has finally finished, so we will be able to speed run these Gebser videos, and I want to do that for you guys because I want to thank you guys for your patience and kind of sticking in there. So, without further ado, let's get into the Aperspectival theme. This is John Gebser. The theme of our epoch is aperspectivity. The eruption of time into perspectival, spatial thought is manifest in all areas of our lives. The emergent consciousness of time as an immeasurable and mentally inconceivable world constituent, it's a beautiful definition of time, an immeasurable and mentally inconceivable world constituent. You cannot measure necessarily frequency. You can measure at least in terms of its temporal unfolding, you can measure the spatial frequencies in that sense, but the actual temporal unfolding, the rhythmic frequency, you can't really, you can infer it. We know it exists in the world, but you can't measure it, you can't put it on the table. Yeah, like suddenness cannot be put on the table, and yet we all know it exists. This is the basic aperspectival manifestation. The same preoccupation was discernible in the most diverse areas as the fourth dimension became visible as time freedom, and it was possible to discern the preoccupation despite the categories and terminologies which traditionally would have impeded the revelation of common concerns, via the concept of acategorical systasis, which has not only simplified our task but has in fact made it possible. Just as the conquest of space was accompanied by a disclosure and a quote-unquote opening up, as it were, of the planes and surfaces of the unperspectival world, so too is today's emergent perception accompanied by an opening of space. The eruption of time gradually leads to the conquest of time through our consciousness. This conquest includes the supersession of time in its entire complexity. That's the whole point of this book. Many of the aperspectival inceptions appearing many of the aperspectival inceptions appearing around us are for the first time being experiments. Just as perspectivity was not discovered in one stroke, so aperspectivity cannot be discovered in one moment. That's another little bit of warning. Don't beat yourself up if you're not getting time freedom and like 100% correctly right away. That's not how it works. The whole point of consciousness structures are that they are ingrained in you. So you're going to have to take a lot of time, no pun intended, to work through that. On the basis of the original manifestations, we can and must clearly understand the theme of our mutational epoch. Without such an awareness, no new and responsible constitution of reality can be realized. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Someone able to renounce the exclusive claim of the mental structure, as mental man once renounced the mythical, does not by any means renounce the mental rational. Like the magical and mythical, it too is required for certain areas of reality. But as the mythical is an overt determination of the magical, the mental an overt determination of the mythical, the integral consciousness structure is an over-determination of the mental. Its mode of realization is not exhausted in quantitative or conceptual thought, in the mythical intuition of the symbolic images of the world, or in the experience of magical unity and power. The new mode of realization erupts in volition, the perception and impartation of truth which signifies the whole and renders it transparent wherever we succeed in liberating ourselves from spatially bound conceptuality without reverting to irrationality. So you can kind of hit this in a couple ways. Number one, when he says integral structures, its mode of realization is not exhausted in quantitative or conceptual thought, obviously. He's referencing the mental structure there, in its mythical intuition of the symbolic images of the world or in the experience of magical unity and power. So it is not limited to or exhausted in one particular structure. That is the whole point of integral consciousness. All of these structures are present and efficacious at literally every moment of our lives. And recognizing this, recognizing the presence and efficaciousness of multiple perspectives, I believe satisfies this irrational desire for volition. Additionally, you also have an impartation of truth that opens up more space, if you will, where you can now recognize aspects of the human condition that were closed off based on rationalism. So additional volition could just be, that's mythic structure, that's magic structure. You have been open to a new space of truth that can be integrated. This need, this necessity, is obvious everywhere. The key words reflecting this situation appear as the basic concern in all manifestations of the areas we have investigated. The openness that is transfigured into plenitude whenever we realize that the disruption of space by time does not lead to emptiness, to to nothingness or nada, but to transparency. So when the purely spatial systems that we bet it all on, we went all in, when those collapse, as they will necessarily do, now that time is being integrated, now that these purely spatial systems are being set into motion, they will erupt. That leads to nihilism. Now, I think I had an old buddy. He gave me a book on nihilism. I never read it, but he was explaining to me, because he had news. He knew I had problems with like mental health, and he made it very clear that he wasn't trying to get me depressed or anything like that. It wasn't like a psychological don't care about anything. It was like, no, from like an epistemic nihilism, no one can really know anything. That's what happens when you get the destruction of rationalism. It's just going to naturally arise, and it's to a certain extent, it does kind of make sense insofar as the aperspectival whole. What Gebser would say is that aperspectivity doesn't mean you can't know anything, as the postmodernist or the nihilist would say. He would say, no, you can know these things, you just can't use one of these tools to know everything. That's it. But if you don't take that Gebserian aperspectival leap, you're going to regress into nihilism, which you shouldn't do. By unifying the systems into spatio-temporal syneresis with the aid of systatic structures, instead of spatially bound syntheses, we perceive interconnections and thus overdetermine the space-time world by space-time freedom or the equinox. So essentially by integrating time and getting out of this triangular thought mode that we've covered so often in this series, we are able to, like I said, open up a new domain of space. Moreover, by surpassing dualism, we resolve the division of the world in favor of the whole. Beautiful. The whole, which we dimly experience in magic, which becomes visible to us in the polarity of the world of descriptive imagery, in which we attempt to conceptualize in a mental rational summation of parts, the whole becomes perceptible through all domains. Origin becomes present. So that's the great beauty of integral consciousness. Rather than seeing just one structure, we see all of them. Our recognition of the transfiguration, the transclarification of the world, sustained by religion, religio, the bond with the past, though increasingly disrupted by reason, is becoming a bond, an obligation to the present, preligio. So religion, which is focused on the past, is transforming into preligio, which focuses on the present. And you can tell that's an integral manifestation because, of course, we know that phenomenologically, we don't experience the past, we don't experience the future, we experience the perpetual present phenomenologically. We can remember things, but as we experience them in the moment, it was in the present. So that's number one. Number two, more obvious appeal would be that past and future shape the present and therefore are present. So if you want to understand the past, paradoxically, you look toward the present. Same thing applies to the future. Okay. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to prime you. We're just going to read this next part. An obligation to the present, preligio. The profound Christian truth with regards to transparency, the diaphaneity of the world, becomes perceptible. The genuine eruption of the other side into this side, the presence of the beyond and the here and now, of death and life, of the transcendent and the immanent, of the divine and the human, becomes transparent. God's incarnation was not in vain. Religion intensified to preligio, and this is intended to circumscribe the profound Christianity of the integral consciousness structure without any theological claim, is presentation of origin, the recognition of creativity and creation, and the integration of our lives as one of the numerous and meaningful forms revealing integrity over the whole. Okay, we're going to have to talk about this for a second. So John David Ebert, when he read this, he was very disappointed. He doesn't like, I'm not a Christian. I don't go to church. I think he doesn't like Christianity far more than I do. I think it can be cringe and annoying sometimes, but on the whole, I don't really think it's that big of a deal. But he was very, very, very disappointed that after all this amazing, great stuff, and a lot of it was spiritual, that essentially Gebser's recommendation at the end was just a transformation of Christianity. Now, here's the problem. It's very obvious to understand why he read it that way. Because you think, well, he uses Christianity as an example to express it as a great expression of integral consciousness. Okay, so he's a Christian, right? But then he makes this little hedging my bets claim, and he says this is without any theological claim. So charitably, what he's doing is he's saying that the Christianity and the idea of the incarnation is a great cultural expression of the newfound or the new integral structure's relation to spirituality, insofar as when Jesus, quote-unquote, came down from the heavens, what happened was transcendence, spirit was embedded in the practical world. No longer was there this divided world of spirit up there and earth in here. Now that Jesus is here, the spirit has been brought down to the terrestrial sphere. Like he says, immanence and transcendence, they're all unified, or integrated, I should say. So what he's saying is, without making the claim that Christianity is theologically true, it's a great expression of integral structure's relation to spirit. And then he says, and this, well, let's just say, we'll continue reading. Let's say if you think you come to that conclusion. Because at first reading, you think, I understand where John's coming from, but I also understand where Jean is coming from, and I think I'll go with Jean. But let's read a little bit further and see if what he has to say is true. This new self-constituting consciousness structure discovers and surpasses the ultimate and most profound antithesis of rationalism between faith and knowledge, religion and science. There we go. Not only because it becomes gradually apparent to what an unsettling degree of scientific theses themselves often emerge from presuppositions based on belief, even the world of numbers and their laws has a limited validity, applicable only to the materialized aspects of our space-time world, but also because antitheses of this kind are not reconcilable with the new consciousness structure. Okay, number one. So first of all, knowledge relies on faith. A lot of your rational abstract theories, of course, rely on a pre-theoretical experience. We use the classic Heidegger example. Anger, in a pre-theoretical mode of being or engagement with anger is something that controls you. It is when your fists get clenched and your cheeks get red and the blood starts pumping and you start sweating and you start throwing punches almost automatically. That's one mode of being with anger. But then after that, moment settles and we think about it, anger gets transported into the world of metaphysical abstract space and it becomes an object to be reflected upon. The pre-theoretical means there was no object to be reflected on. The theoretical means now it's an object to be reflected on. The point is, the theoretical object to be reflected on relies on the pre-theoretical. When Gebser is saying, so essentially you have to believe in the faith of your pre-theoretical faculties. Now, it's only faith from the perspective of rationality, of course, from the mental structure. But if you're viewing it from the perspective of the pre-rational and irrational faculties, there's no faith at all. You directly experience it. So it really depends on how you want to frame this. So Gebser, on one hand, is saying your rational knowledge already relies on faith. So this hyper division and one or the other, one doesn't affect the other, that's already wrong. Two, the whole point of Gebser is saying, well, knowledge, by knowledge you mean rational knowledge, that's limited to the quantifiably measurable, the consciously known, the palpable, the material, the spatial. Spirit, spiritual other side, whatever you want to call it, that's immeasurable, immaterial, and beyond us. So there you go. All right, let's see. Okay, now we're going to skip ahead to daily life. The new consciousness, which was anticipated and first took shape in the creation of artists, thinkers, and scientists, will not be fully valid so long as it is not lived in daily life. What form can it take? It will take its own necessary course. Yet the confusion of the present situation requires a certain readiness, open-mindedness, and cooperation of each individual. And I would like to give you guys a little bit of encouragement here. Again, you guys see a part of me, obviously. I'm showing you the polished after the fact. What you guys didn't see me during this series was getting very frustrated with myself because I couldn't get this and I would throw a pen across the room and just get angry. All right, so it's going to be difficult to understand all of this. Again, like I mentioned earlier, it's an ingrained way of thinking. You have to fight against that, and that is going to take time, whether it be time in a measurable sense of years or repetition or frequency or whatever you want to call it. Even rationally, this makes sense. Like, I'm sure most of you guys are academics of some sort. If you're a mathematician, you might be working on a problem for 2 weeks. I mean, 2 weeks, that's 24 hours a day, times 7 is 168, times 2, 336 hours of working on a math problem, all right? And then, in one single moment, the realization comes, kind of like John Nash. The equation came in a dream. So all that, and then boom, in 1 second, you've got it. So the temporal unfolding of knowledge is not this linear straight line. So don't treat it as that way. Don't beat yourself up if you're not being a perfect little integral, manifestation. It's not going to happen. It's going to take a lifetime to work on. So pick yourself up, brush yourself off, you're going to be okay, all right? You're already infinitely further than most people. Just don't become arrogant about it. It will happen of its own accord, since the structure of the new mode of realization has begun to manifest itself with an undeniable intensity in the most diverse areas of our lives. But each individual's attitude and mode of behavior can ensure that the process consolidating the new consciousness can occur without a detour through a possible catastrophe. There have been enough teachers, we have encountered them in the course of the foregoing pages, as the precursors of the new consciousness. So also are the latent teachers at work, the trustees of the reflected radiance of primordial wisdom. Excuse me. It is equally evident that in time, the new structure must infuse the public consciousness with its strength. The foundations of our thinking are already changed and restructured by events, and no one can escape the restructuration for too long. Imperceptibly, the new structure will acquire validity for all as a matter of course. Those who do not accept it and persist in the old will be left aside in the course of next generations. Hello, rationalists. Hello, rationalist right-wingers who say, the world around me is changing, but I'm staying put. To a certain extent, that's a good thing because you're staying by your principles. The problem is you're a spatial object that's going to erupt because you were put into motion. Good job. You're getting left behind. And now you've condemned the world for everyone to go crazy. So well done, everyone. Owing to an increased technologization and a false application of time to technology, the deficient mental structure, rational consciousness, will dig its own grave. Yep. It will be surpassed by a more intensified Christianity, by the integral consciousness. This is not a prophecy, but a presentation of a natural unfolding, vividly manifest in the Spanish, Mexican, and Swiss Austrian examples cited earlier. So this is what I was talking about. Now, I actually do believe that this claim he's making about how the West, or maybe America, will absolutely get left behind, because that's what happened with the Spanish American and the Swiss Austrian. Montezuma, at the very beginning of this series, when the Spanish conquistadors came, he sent sorcerers to go attack them. Obviously, that wasn't going to work against efficient mental structure. You got destroyed. Here's the problem. He just said he's not making a theological claim about Christianity, but now he's sneaking in a little claim here, isn't it? It's all going to be about a more intensified Christianity. So I understand why John David Ebert came to that interpretation, and I think it's reasonable. The immense process, I just wish he would be a little more speaking with his chest. Like, why, if you're a Christian, just say it. Just own it. Be like, yeah, I think it's the best. Like, just own it. Just say it. Yeah, this is what I believe. Like, why are you playing this game? Whatever. The immense process of transformation, like those taking place today, and the far and deep-reaching mutations that have been occurring for generations and extend into the present, are neither accidental nor explicable in ontological, existential, or sociological terms. They are latent in origin. They are always quote-unquote backleaps, so to speak, into the already ever-present future. There you go. This is the way in which origin, budding and folding in space and time, emerges on Earth and in our daily lives. What does that mean? So he's saying that this evolution of consciousness from 1D magic to 2D mythical to 3D mental to 4D integral, this is not random happenstance. This is all part of a grand spiritual narrative, and the reason why every single one precedes the prior one, it's not random. It's not because the Mexicans and the South Americans embraced this cultural practice and that led to this and this led to that. It's not because Western did this or that. There might be some surface level explanations that explain why certain cultures adopt certain intensities of the structures. One culture might be more mythical, one might be more mental. I can buy that. But sure enough, the 1, 2, 3, 4 development is coming. And the reason why it's coming is because all of these are aspects of the spiritual whole that is origin. So when he says it's a back leap, what he's saying is he's not integral consciousness is already latent in origin, and all it's doing is manifesting, crystallizing into something that needs to exist and manifest on Earth. So rather than starting from 1, 2, 3, and then creating with our own minds 4, no, 4 was already latent in us, and now is the time for it to emerge and manifest. So that's what he means. There's a grand spiritual game being played here. All of our lives are meaningful inherently, and there's really not much else to it. The divine spiritual source and future of that which appears to us as an event ought never be forgotten when attempts are made at mere explanation. So, for example, even let's take right-wingers. You could say right-wingers. There's been a sudden surge in religious identification. People are now more Christian. Some are even more Muslim or Islam, whatever religion. Some may think, oh, that's just a surface level event that could be explained by, I don't know, Charlie Kirk being killed, or they're tired of the left's whatever. Or you could say, as Oswald Spengler has done, that that's the second religiousness. This is actually a sign that your civilization is dying, and this will naturally happen because that's the natural cycles of the world and civilization. There's a spiritual layer here that needs to be integrated. An origin from which every moment of our lives draws its sustenance is by nature divine and spiritual. Anyone who denies this denies himself, and there is today a considerable number who do. Yes, me. I hold my hand up. That was me. Those who do not deny, but rather affirm it in their open-mindedness and simplicity are already the co-creators of aperspectivity, of the integral consciousness structure. Beautiful. This is founded on the emergent consciousness and on the transparency of the whole. Once only did the disciples of Christ perceive his transfiguration. This singular diaphaneity of the world on earth, this unique manifestation of spiritual power, is not a past event. The annual celebration of Pentecost, among other events, evidences this. Regarded historically, humanity is perhaps living in the 3-day period of descent into hell. Have we passed through this descent in the events of the first half of our century? However this may be, in those days only Christ's followers could see his transfiguration. But one day it will be the larger community. It is not accidental that the sense for transparency is erupting everywhere. So again, say it with your chest. If you want to interpret this through a Christian lens, you have the right to do so. And I'm sure you have good arguments, but say it with your chest, all right? Come on, don't play this game. We're not making a Christian theological claim. You clearly are, all right? What does all this have to do with daily life? Something decisive, since what is emerging in the greater context must be concurrently co-prepared in the lesser, beautifully. This does not mean that it is the number of those who realize and live the new that is decisive. Decisive is the intensity with which the individuals live the new. I'm going to repeat for emphasis. This does not mean that it is the number of those who realize and live the new that is decisive. Decisive is the intensity with which the individuals live the new. It does not matter how many people know Jean Gebser. It does not matter how many people know about integral consciousness or will accept it as a valid intellectual project or anything like that. Who cares? I couldn't care less. There are things in my life. I was always kind of like this because I was a rationalist. But there are things in my life that I do in my daily personal life that people don't really understand. And I don't really care about explaining it to them. I understand. I mean, not sound arrogant, but I see things that they don't. I see elements of the magic structure. I see elements of the mythic structure. I see time and its layers. And there are certain things that I just don't really care about. Like, for example, I work full-time. I'm certainly not allergic to work. I like working. I don't want to work 80, 90 hours a week and have no family and have no time with my whatever. And that's the rationalist way of doing things. Everything has to be about production, about manipulating an objectified space, about measurement and all that stuff. You know, that's nice, but an integral approach will say, well, hold on here. One, I can look from the perspective of the future backwards. And I know I can do this because people do this in real life. They look back on their deathbed, oh, I wish I spent more time with my family. I can take that perspective now because time is shaped as a sphere. And I can look back and just kind of feel and go, yeah, I don't really want to do that. So I'm going to live a more spiritually fulfilled life, even if that means making less money, because I want to be here with my daughter, with my girlfriend, with my family, and all that great stuff. Now take that as a microcosm and apply it to other things. You could apply that to other principles. So it's okay to be a little different. Just don't be a dick about it. You don't have to be like you said, like I just said, all of our lives are spiritually meaningful, which means there is a certain degree of relativism insofar as, like, you are better than them, but you're also not. You are made of the same spiritual sustenance. So, just, live differently, be unique, because you are one of the few who is living in deficient rationalism. You are working with the efficient energies of integral structure or integral consciousness. Live that intensity, and let your life, let your actions be the best advertisement for integral consciousness. That's what I do. And frankly, I really don't care. I don't care what midwit rationalists think. Sometimes I hear midwit rationalists offer counter arguments, and it really depends on my past experience with them. If I feel that they're a reasonable person, then maybe I'll get into it. But if I don't, I'll just walk away. I just kind of go, flick the hat and just keep moving. Anyone Anyone with a sense of detachment from himself also gains a detachment from the world, including a sense of tolerance, and that is what we have done here. What have we grown a detachment from? Rationalism and the way that being is disclosed according to rationalism. So now that we've gained a detachment, we have a sense of tolerance. Today, everyone is in a position to achieve this within the scope of his possibilities. Everyone has the means today to achieve self-transparency and to give an account of the conditions, temporal limits, and the limitations of his feelings, thought, and action. Remember the breathing, cyclical nature. Magic structures preceding discovery was external, mythicals was internal, mentals was external, and now we're going back to the internal. So we are rendering ourselves transparent. Not just what our ego wants us to see. The ego's mental structure. We are doing the good and the bad. For example, I have feelings prone towards depressiveness, towards anger, towards maybe arguably a little bit of wrath, towards a lack of forgiving. So what I've done, and this is actually what I've done in my daily life, time as a quality has really helped me about this, is I get frustrated. I get angry. Take today. I was getting my haircut today. And I thought I'd signed up before the rush came in, so I was going to get picked first. And I didn't. I got skipped like 4 or 5 times, and I was kind of angry, right? I was like, in the moment, I was pretty upset. I was like, come on, I got shit to do. I want to do this video for you guys. I realized that, hold on, this present moment, emphasis on the time, is permeated or charged by the qualities of anger. Let's stop and examine that anger. Is that anger justified? Well, let's think. What am I contributing to the situation? Well, I want my haircut, which is reasonable because I'm paying for it, but I also want it now. And I also feel like I have a certain degree of entitledness to when I get my haircut. So not only am I having a problem, I'm having a time anxiety problem. That's what you do. What do you think you do now that you've rendered these things transparent? We'll say, hold on now. One, the magic structure is evident because I can feel myself getting angry. The mythic structure is evident because I see this as a sign of being disrespected. And the mental structure is active because my ego is going out of control here. Now that they're transparent, what do you think I did? I said, that's deficient nonsense. These are normal people trying to get through their day. You're going through a little angry moment that will necessarily cycle into good times. So you need to either wait this out or try to integrate it in a way that makes it more likely that the cycle into more positive moments will emerge, okay? So there are temporal limitations. If you are angry, there is a limit to that. Try to fight that and try to integrate it. There will necessarily be that way. This is what integral transparency looks like in terms of self-reflection. Use time as a quality to your advantage. If I know I'm angry in the moment, you know what I did when that woman eventually cut my hair? I didn't say a word. You know why I didn't say a word? Because I was angry, and I was going to yell at this poor woman for doing nothing wrong. So now that I know I'm angry and I'm in a position, shut up. You know what I mean? Just be quiet. These are the temporal conditions and limits of our feelings that Gebser is talking about. I'm not flawless, by the way. I make a ton of mistakes in my life. Everyone today can become aware of the various temporal forms which all point to origin, and everyone can experience timelessness in the union of conjugal love. Ooh, Gebser getting laid, all right. The timelessness of nightly deep sleep, in the experience of rhythmic complementarity and natural temporicity, which unites him in every heartbeat and rhythmic breath with the courses of the universe, and everyone can employ measured time. The magical, mythical, and mental structures may, in other words, become transparent, particularly in their ever-valid effectualities as our co-constituents. This is a beginning, if only because the individual learns to see himself as a whole as the interrelationship and interplay of magic unity, mythical complementarity, and mental conceptuality and purposefulness. Only as a whole man is man in a position to perceive the whole. But does not our life in the factory and the office, the senselessness of our labor... This is why I like Gebser. He actually gets to the specifics. Like someone would, I imagine, be like, okay, well, I work in a factory, so this is nice. But he actually addresses this. But does not our life in the factory and the office, the senselessness of our labors today, automation, mechanization, and technologization stand in the way? On the contrary, all the more clearly will the false form of time's eruption be evident as expressed in motoricity and the scramble for worthless quote-unquote goods and the like which must be overcome. So when you have the rhythmic factory that just constantly has the polar 2D circle, this, that, and you have the mental time where you're constantly looking at the clock that seems to never turn. And then you have the psychic temporicity of waiting for the clock to turn, which makes time feel longer. All of these, an understanding of these layers of time help us realize that no, these factories need to be changed because they're destroying the soul. Our environment, the factories and offices, is our own creation, and we've allowed the formlessness of this void to be imposed on us by the empty mechanisms. True. Such an environment will change to the extent that we are able to realize our task, and for this, everyone has the requisite leisure and sense of obligation. By the way, when he says, our environment, the factories and offices is our own creation, and we have allowed the formlessness of this void to be imposed on us by empty mechanism. That sounds like, I don't know when Deleuze released his little, I would say little, I don't say that to undermine or demean, released his work, I can't remember what it's called, the Thousand Plateaus or something. Sounds like kind of a precursor to that, but it could be that Deleuze had his own thing going on. I actually agree with that critique. I know I give postmodernists a lot of shit, but I actually think I sat with it for a few days. I'm like, yeah, there is something with that. Between the hours of earning a living and bedtime, there are many hours to be used wisely, though not for the superficial gain of becoming quote-unquote cultured or learned. The hours and days are to be spent not only purposefully, but also meaningfully. What is today called free time must not be squandered leisurely, but employed to acquire time freedom. So in alignment with your spiritual purpose, you are here to do something. Get off your ass. We don't read just for the sake of going to the bar trying to bang hipster chicks because I read Gebser. No one cares. We read for time freedom. Now, what does that mean? Where do we start? Well, read some of the books mentioned in this work. Read T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot's an amazing complement to Gebser. Start reading The History of the Concept of Time by Heidegger. These are great complements, great follow-ups. Epochs of great confusion and general uncertainty in a given world contain the slumbering, not yet manifest seeds of clarity and certainty. The manifestations of the aperspectival world evinced above show that these seeds are already pressing toward realization. This means that we are approaching the quote-unquote zenith of confusion and are thus nearing the necessary breakthrough. The past decade alone, since 1954, has demonstrated the accuracy of this claim. On the one hand, there is a further entrenchment of rationalism, materialism, frenzy for progress, and senseless activity, all affected by time anxiety. On the other, although less dramatic, is the increase of aperspectival manifestations, as we have seen. I'm not denying this. I actually think the 60s is when integral consciousness really broke out. And I think you could tell by the politics. Everything hits. The new left started going. They have the new aperspectival way. Postmodernism started going. You got it. Like, I think the 60s wasn't. The confusion in the individual's everyday life, his lack of fulfillment in his work, his isolation in the masses, his powerlessness over against the idle running of anonymity, whether of mechanisms or of bureaucracies, hello Deleuze, this insecurity and enslavement are only reflections of the general malaise. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. All work, the genuine work which we must achieve, is that which is most difficult and painful, the work on ourselves. If we do not freely take upon ourselves this pre-acceptance of the pain and torment, they will be visited upon us in an otherwise necessary individual and and universal collapse. Anyone disassociated from his origin and his spiritually sensed task acts against origin. Anyone who acts against it has neither a today nor a tomorrow. Based. Each attempted and successful clarification of the confusion in our daily lives and actions, each interception of anxiety, each achieved grain of certainty, each distanciation from oneself, regardless how slight, each discarded prejudice and resentment. These are the necessary achievements in order to establish the new reality and to obtain for each and all a sense of meaningfulness. Everyone is free to achieve this. Whoever gambles away this freedom has gambled and lost his life in death. So, dire warning. That example I gave at the haircut, that is a perfect example of an irrational clarification and an irrational detachment. I recognize the presence of the structures. I recognize how that was affecting the moment, emphasis time as a quality, and I use that to inform my actions. I wasn't going to use that as an excuse to yell at this poor woman who didn't do anything wrong. Okay, that was my problem, not hers. I had to work, and it was painful because I had to admit that I was being a little bitch, frankly, and I was being a little whiny little child. This is life. This is the whole point of our spiritual existence, to overcome these flaws so we can learn. What of the millions who remain deaf? Also, by the way, all atheists are enemies. You heard it here declared by Gebser. Anyone where to go? Anyone who works against origin. No. We're not playing them. There's a spiritual current here. You're going to acknowledge it. What of the millions who remain deaf? Their joys, power, and possession. will dwindle over the coming years, either owing to their false and destructive use, whereby these quote-unquote goods destroy each other, or to the restructuring of consciousness, which unmasks the unimportance of these false values. Such unmasking will rob many of their material pseudo-security and place on them social demands to which they cannot adequately respond. The new attitude will be consolidated only when the individual can gradually begin to disregard his ego. There you go. As long as our thinking is exclusively self-centered, the world will remain fragmented. At best, the quote-unquote thou will become visible to the I, but never the whole. So at best, the ego can recognize, I guess, thou as in the other or maybe the masses, but they can never recognize the paradoxical unification through division. Self-isolation is a withdrawal in the face of the masses, the deficient mode of community. Of course, we talked about this. The problem with the masses, obviously, is that the ego regresses, and once the ego goes, well, there goes all moral responsibility. So it comes as no surprise when you have these normal people throwing Jews into ovens or committing the Rwandan genocide or whatever it is. That is the problem with irrationalism. It is a regression. We see it all the time. We see it in contemporary politics all the time. We see it with the extremists. The far left, they go crazy. The far right, they go crazy. And no one has the balls to just say, hold on here. I'll be the individual to speak up because this is insane. In time, it will lead to the loss of the ego and to ego-side, since the flight back to the masses bring about the destruction and annulment of the I. This is totally undesirable. Do not do this. What is necessary is neither egotism nor egolessness. Thank you. Egolessness is a deficient regression into magic, while a mere egotism is a deficient continuation in the mental rational structure. Thank you. Only the overcoming of the I, the concomitant overcoming of egolessness and egotism, places us in the sphere of ego freedom, of the acronon and transparency. Ego freedom means freedom from the self. It is not a loss or a denial of the I, not an ego side, but an overcoming of ego. So the classic example, I'm going to put aside some lifelong differences because I know that, yes, I've been wronged, and yes, it makes me feel good, but that's my ego, my sense of self. There is a broader spiritual purpose being played. I'm going to put that aside and reconcile. That would be an example of putting your ego aside. It's difficult. It's really difficult to do, but, the best things come from it. And when this happens, the events and phenomena of his surroundings will set themselves right. That's correct. But the social and the technological systems will restructure themselves since they are incongruous with the new mode of realization and its restructuration of the world. And that's kind of what we're seeing now. Since this mode of realization excludes a simplistic goal orientation, which permits it to function in only a limited area of reality, the surrounding world will be altered in all its aspects as we alter them to correspond to the requirements of our respective consciousness structure. Then will the nightmare of our times come to an end, the false employment of machines whose empty motion and mere motoricity threaten to become autonomous. Then it will become apparent that both they and the most recent technology are our physical projections, which we can retrieve and master, particularly since there are occasional four-dimensional inceptions present in technology. Fedor Stepan says that film corresponds to our wish to be released from three-dimensional gravitational pull. Yet today it is still a machine that force-feeds images. Radio's capacity to nearly nullify space and time, the temporal telescoping of spatial distances by the airplane, accelerators such as the cyclotron, which are able to release atomic events and reactions, all of these technological achievements can become liberators if their underlying time components become transparent for us. Since it institutes an empty movement, present-day technology is an unmastered time. It is the most impressive example of rational man's failure when faced with his task of resolving the problem of time. Instead of intensifying time, man has quantified it by rational thinking into a cascading motion. This failure, which encroaches on our daily lives with increasing force, will be successfully corrected when the awareness of the foundations and the true demands of a genuine technology are pioneered. This awareness will restructure technology to the same degree that it is now about to reshape our entire reality. Then, in the most successful realizations, the everyday will be an all, i.e., universal day. And that is where we will stop today. Next, we have the twofold task, and then honest to God, like what is after the twofold task? Okay, the twofold okay. The twofold task is like, all right, yeah, we'll do one video, but it's not much. Concretion of the spiritual. Hey, we have 2 more sections. We have 2 more videos. Actually, technically 3, because we'll do a criticism video as well. So, thank you guys again. We'll try to speed run these last couple sections because I do appreciate your guys' patience. You guys are the best. I do love you guys so much. We are so close. Thank you guys so much for continuing to watch and continuing to, it's been like, what, almost 2 years? I think I started this in 2024. You guys are the best, right? That's kind of the benefit, right? Like the multiple layers of time exist simultaneously. I knew that going in. I thought, we have the short term, which is I can get videos out and I could do it on hot topics, and that's good. But let's use time as an advantage. Now that we have years available to us to dig into this, let's do that by getting into detail and going line by line, essentially. Time informs space. I love you guys very much. I will see you soon, and you're the best. Thank you, guys.